with our plan so much better than if we're super rigid. So now we're actually looking at Gina's sort of more realistic breakdown, and you notice that not only does she have different time ranges for her meals, but she also has calorie ranges, because it's just not probably going to work out to be that specific all the time. Now you will notice, if you add up the lower end of these calorie ranges for every meal, it's going to be less than her 1,800, and if you add up the higher end calorie ranges, it's going to be more than 1,800. So this is where you got to sort of, again, learn to flex within your day and give yourself a little bit of that room, and give yourself a little bit of a break too, so you don't have to be perfect all the time. Any questions about this? Okay. So the last thing you have on your worksheet, step 5, is actually an opportunity for you to take your schedule and your preference for 3 meals or meals and snacks and start to break down your calorie ranges. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to think about this, just a couple though, because we're going to come back to this. But I will tell you that this is going to be very important for your quiz. So you are going to need to do it. Does everyone here have, or I shouldn't say that, do you all fall into a more routine kind of day, or are things very, very different every day? Anyone?
Different.
Very different? Okay, so learning to flex within this, and I even work with people that I kind of like to think about as like weekdays and weekends, because sometimes weekdays are more consistent, sometimes they're not. But if you want to just focus on a weekday for now, that makes it a little bit easier. But if you have really different wake up times every morning, you may have to do this twice. You may have to have a early morning day and a later morning day, whatever it is that works out for you. But really the easiest way to start with this, start with what time you wake up in the morning. Make sure that first thing comes within an hour. And breakfast doesn't have to come first here. I wanted to be really clear about that. What if you work out first thing in the morning? Pre-exercise snack might be the first thing that comes up here. Breakfast may actually be second. And we're going to talk about sports nutrition here. But do you have any questions about how to do this? What this means? We're going to come back to it right at the end, but okay. Yes?
Should our guidelines come from the example that you set, or this is just how we choose to break up our day?
So you're asking if the guidelines should come from Gina being about a third, and a third?
Yeah.
That is an ideal way to do this. Or, if you want to get real fancy, even if you work out in the morning, like if you work out first thing in the morning, you are already burning more energy than you would have if you would have just rolled out of bed and taken a shower and gone to work. So you may actually even need more calories earlier in the morning. Ideally, I would not backload those calories. So either start with somewhere around that third, breakfast, lunch, and dinner snack situation, or even front load it a little bit more if that makes you feel a little bit more comfortable. Okay? Good question. Any other questions? Okay, so let's talk about that exercise fuel. You remember I had mentioned that our carbohydrates are our body's preferred source of energy. They're our fastest and our easiest to digest. They're very important to help preserve our lean mass or our muscle. And they actually are required to start the process that breaks down body fat to use for fuel. You just need a tiny little bit for it, but it is very important. So you need to consume something with carbohydrate prior to exercise. So if you roll out of bed in the morning and go out the door to go work out, you still need to think of something that's got some carbohydrate in it. What's going to happen if you do not do that is you have been sleeping all night, hopefully really well. If you guys are working out as hard as you are during FitTrip, you guys should be sleeping like babies. You've been sleeping really well. You haven't eaten since the evening before. And typically, we get up within an hour of waking, we eat our breakfast. Does anyone know why it's called breakfast? Break fast, right? You've been fasting all night. So your body goes into that resting state. We need it to wake up, right? And we want to give it that energy. So if you don't have anything at all before you exercise, you will start to break down your stored fat and use it as fuel. It will happen. It does take a longer amount of time to start breaking down, so you may feel a little sluggish for a while. Again, it requires that carbohydrate, so your body's going to have to produce some carbohydrate from when it's stored. That's going to take a little while. And we don't burn fat for fuel very efficiently as our heart rate goes up. So if you're doing anything that is going to increase your heart rate, your body really wants to rely mostly on those carbohydrates. So a great thing to think about having before you exercise is a carbohydrate. You can start small. I talk to a lot of people all the time, they're like, well, I can't eat before I exercise, it makes my stomach hurt, whatever it is, or you're just so used to not doing it. I feel great while I exercise. These things are all possibly true. This is something that happen, but just like you're training your body to work harder, you can also actually train your body to digest food better before exercise. But start small so that you don't get a stomach ache. And the more simple the carbohydrate, or the less time you have before exercising, the more simple the carbohydrate that you can consume. And if you have no time for anything else, go liquid. Sports drinks are great. You could try a little bit of juice. You could have some applesauce, a piece of fruit. And again, if you have a little more time, chewing something is okay. Toast, graham cracker, keep it simple. And remember that carbohydrate is going to be very important to the building and preserving your lean mass. After you exercise, you need carbohydrate and protein. So you notice we don't really need protein before we work out, right? Because really what we're trying to provide our body with is energy. After, it's recovery. So we need carbohydrate to replace the stores in our body. We do store carbohydrate, as I mentioned, I think, way back in the beginning, but it's a limited store. So as you exercise, you can actually use most of it up. After about an hour of exercise, you've used something like 60 to 90% of your stored carbohydrate, depending on your intensity. So you need to replace some of that carbohydrate. Carbohydrate is actually also important in repairing muscle. Protein's the most important thing in that, but carbohydrate works in that metabolic process. So you do need to consume some carbohydrate as well as protein, which is important to repair the little micro tears that you make in your muscles while you're exercising. If it's a strength training session, your needs would sort of be in the 20 to 25 grams of protein. If it's a endurance session, 10 to 15 grams of protein. To put this in perspective, a Greek yogurt, those little 6-ounce Greek yogurts have anywhere between like 12 and 15-ish grams of protein. An egg has 7, okay? A glass of milk has 8. So think about the volume of what you actually need to consume to get to those reparative needs with the protein. Ideally, also, our bodies are really fascinating places. There's some magical things that happen. After you exercise, we actually can repair those micro tears in muscles better in the first 30 minutes after the finishing of your exercise than you can 2 hours later. There's all these pathways that open up and make that repair and recovery work better. So focusing on getting this post-exercise, whether it's a meal or a snack, within the first 30 minutes. If it has to be an hour, fine. If you wait 2 hours, not only are you not going to repair and recover as well, but you are also probably going to be so much hungrier than if you would have just eaten soon after the exercise. And then again, that's when we turn into Cookie Monster. Any questions about the fueling for exercise? Okay. Hydration. This is so much more important than fueling. Don't get me wrong, fueling is very important. But you know you'll die without having fluids for about 72 hours. That's assuming you have no hydration, nothing coming into your body. You can go a really long time without fueling. In exercise, if you don't fuel well, you won't feel good. You're not going to perform well. You're going to break down muscle. It's not going to be good. When you become dehydrated, it can become very dangerous. Luckily, it's a little chilly outside right now, so we're not dealing with the humidity and the high temperatures, but this is something that's really important to keep in mind. Once you become mildly dehydrated, it takes 24 hours to recover, and that's assuming that you are working to recover it, okay? So you are working on the fluids, you're working on the electrolytes. If you are working out every day, which I assume there are probably a lot of people in FitTrip that are working out at least 5 days a week, so if you're doing back-to-backs and you're dehydrated, again, you're not going to feel good, but this is when you can get into kind of a dangerous state. So focusing on your fluids is really key. Ideally, we get most of our fluids from naturally unsweetened and decaffeinated beverages. So water is really important. A mild dehydration is when you lose 2% of your body weight. So say you go out for a run. You weigh yourself right before you run. You come back in, you weigh yourself right when you get in. If you have lost 2% of your body weight, you didn't lose 2% of fat. As nice as that might be on a run, it's not going to happen. It's going to be coming from fluids. So it's fluids that you've sweat. And this is how you can kind of start to monitor your hydration status as you exercise. Step on the scale before, step on the scale after. Now it gets real tricky because if you're consuming fluids during the time, it's hard to counterbalance all of that. And this is where your dietitian can come in really handy if you really want to work on this. So our fluid needs for exercise are that we need about 8 to 10 ounces, somewhere in that 20-minute before range. This does not mean that you need to walk up to the water fountain, chug water, and then get on the treadmill if that's what you're going to do. Be a little mindful about it. Make sure you're not too full in the stomach. During, about every 15 to 20 minutes, you should be heading to the water fountain. Again, this doesn't mean you need to drink an entire bottle, but staying on top of it. And then afterwards, you want to replace the fluids that you've lost. And weighing yourself before and after can be a really good way to figure out what you've lost and therefore what you need to replace. Does anyone know what a pound of fluid equals in ounces? 16 ounces. So if you lose, say you do want to weigh yourself, if you lose 1 pound during your exercise, it's the same as 16 ounces, a pint, 2 cups of fluid. Okay? So I mean, that's a lot, right? That you need to stay on top of. If your exercise is less than an hour, totally fine to just stick with water. If it's more than an hour, you want to replace fluids as well as electrolytes, sodium being the most important of those, and carbohydrates. I didn't mention that on the fueling slide. So if you were really exercising, if you're going to be doing like a 2-hour workout, you need to make sure that not only you have fluids with you, but that you're replacing the carbohydrate too to give you the fuel. The electrolytes are important to actually keep your fluid balance. Okay, so if it's just water with no sodium and potassium, you can still actually not feel really great. Questions about the hydration? Is that clear? Gotta eat, gotta drink? Okay, awesome. And,
All right, so you have all of these tools now to work with to do FitTrip really well. And we're just gonna kind of blaze through some other tools that you can use in this process. The first one is food journaling, okay? We can't make any changes if we don't actually know what we're consuming, all right? So food journaling is a wonderful practice to see what you're consuming. We talked about earlier, we tend to overestimate exercise and underestimate what we're putting in our bodies, okay? So this helps us to have a realistic viewpoint of that. Doing it as you eat is better than doing it at the end of the day, because it gets easy to forget that like handful of nuts and handful of M&Ms as you walk past Joey's desk, which can add up after a week, okay? So doing it as you go, and there's a number of ways that you can do it. Research has shown that people who food journal can lose significantly more weight than those who don't, even just from the monitoring process. I have had people tell me they weren't even really trying to lose weight, they just wanted to see what they consumed, and just having to write it down made them be more mindful about what they were taking in. So food journaling is a great practice. You have some wonderful tools online, again, where your FitTrip guidebook is. There are some template logs on there that you can use to track what you're taking in the day. The cool thing about putting pen to paper and actually having to write it down is that you're not just tracking your food, you can also track how you're feeling. Were you full after that meal? Did you suddenly get hungry an hour and a half later? Were you kind of hangry in the afternoon or sleepy? You can track emotions, hunger patterns, satisfaction, as well as the food that you're taking in, okay? So that can be really helpful in the kind of pen to paper. You will have to put in manually the nutrient information. Those are not bad things to learn. It just may take a little bit more time. So this really depends on your preferences. You can, this is kind of what your log looks like, but I would go and look on the FitTrip website to get that information. The next great resource is MyFitnessPal. If you are a techie person, you always have your phone on you. MyFitnessPal is a wonderful app that can help you do this. So all you need, they have a big database of foods, beverages, even eating out. They now have a restaurant portion where you can go into certain restaurants on the app